Hi everyone. Uh, my name is Zahra, and as Chris mentioned, I'm the Principal Product Manager of IT Security Assessment at Keysight. And today I'm going to discuss about the importance of building the secure IoT products from the ground up. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you how to really secure the products from ground up, because it's actually a long session by itself, but I'm going to discuss about the importance of the IoT products, the multi-layered structure of these IoT devices, and also provide some case studies of what we've done so far of different vulnerabilities that we identified at different levels of these devices, from the design level to protocol level to the application layers. So yeah, I was into actually cybersecurity since I was a child, and I really like that. And I studied software engineering at university, and then over time I worked at several companies, and then in 2016 we started Firmalizer, the first automated firmware security analysis platform in the market. And I know that a lot of you have heard about SBOM, software bill of material, and things like that, and this was something we did a long time ago for several customers. And then at the end of 2013, it was acquired by Keysight Technologies, and I also transitioned as a product manager of the IoT security assessment at Keysight. So Keysight is actually a world leader in the test and measurement, and I'm sure a lot of you might not have heard about Keysight as a security solution provider, but actually Keysight provides several security solutions in the market. And the other point is that Keysight is also a member of the CTA and also one of the participant in the White House when White House announced the Cyber Trust Mark. And as you know, Cyber Trust Mark is the new cybersecurity labeling program in the United States, and it's based upon NIST 8425 standard, which is for consumer IoT devices. And Keysight is one of the active participants of the CTA working group that provides advisory for the FTC regarding the Cyber Trust Mark, and we're active even in several IT security regulations as well. So also, if you have any questions regarding regulations, you can also reach out to me. And last week I was also in ETSI cybersecurity conference, and mainly talking and discussing about several IT security regulations that we have, and also doing the mapping and the impact of the Cyber Resilience Act on the new regulations. But as I mentioned today, I'm mainly going to talk about the test and the reason to test these kinds of IoT devices and the different requirements, but different layers that require testing. So IoT devices, XIoT devices, or connected devices, what we're talking about are several devices, PLCs, cameras, medical devices, which can have a digital element and can be connected to a specific network. So that's what we mean by IoT device. So it's not just a specific sensor which is connected to the network. What we mean by IoT is a broader range of the connected devices. And all of these devices actually have had several vulnerabilities in their history of their lives, from the PLCs that give access to the corporate network and put a critical infrastructure, at least, to medical devices that could put the life of the patients at risk, or enterprise IoT devices like printers. And the problem is that when attackers hack these devices, it's not just a device that they put in dangers. It is also the network which these devices enable access into them is also in danger. Like, for example, let's say if I attack your router in your network, or a switch, or even your firewall, I can also access the network or access to your other assets in the network. Uh, and the problem with these IoT devices, I mean, we have seen, for example, we see servers, laptops, mobile devices, and we always say why. I mean, these IoT devices are really insecure. And the first thing is that, well, this is the first of all, there is a multi-layered nature of these device security. So these devices are, several chipsets, hardwares, and even each of these chipsets and hardware are not really manufactured by just one manufacturer. One device manufacturer can buy, a third-party chipset from another manufacturer and, embed it inside the device. And then, the vulnerabilities like side channel attack or tampering or insecure device could actually come into this layer. And then we have firmware. And firmware, of course, we have mainly two types of the firmware. We call one is rich OS, which can be a full operating system, including application and everything, or bare metal firmware, which is directly programmed into the device. Okay, and then the vulnerabilities. There are several vulnerabilities that can be imposed by an insecure firmware. Could be insecure firmware design, or it could be vulnerable third-party components or stuff like that. And then we have network protocols, okay? So there are several network protocols are using these IoT devices, and, vulnerabilities like, wireless communication fixes or weaknesses, or really unsecured traffic is also, one of the other sources of vulnerability. And then at the upper layer, we have application software that can, have vulnerabilities like input validation and those things. So, and then at the next stage, we have the supply chain security issue. So these devices, they can be actually advertently or inadvertently be introduced vulnerabilities at different stages of this supply chain. For example, it can be at the design level. Maybe a malicious insider put something into the device, and maybe, something that can come up from the, insecure design at a specific level. And then, we have manufacturing, we have shipment, and we have also end user. And at each, stage of supply chain, there can be new vulnerabilities who could be introduced here. And this is not just one device vulnerability. This supply chain actually can also be the supply chain of the third-party components that are used and embedded into these IoT devices. Or, for example, third-party software components. Who knows that, how many and which software components are exactly used in these IoT devices, and what would happen if a new vulnerability happens to each of them. And that's why, these days people are talking about SBOM, supply chain security, and NIST also, expected that by 2030, the number of the software compromises as a vulnerable third-party software component would be #1 emerging threat. So that's why we need to have comprehensive security techniques, so from the chip level to the application layer, in order to be able to secure these IoT devices. So, for example, at chip level, we can, think of, some side channel attack or secure boot, or, for example, protecting the JTAG and the debug interfaces. And then at firmware level, we have to do the static binary analysis or dynamic firmware analysis, or doing SBOM generation, and even, working on some reverse engineering of the firmware of the device as well. We have network level, which, of course, protocol fuzzing is one of the most important testing methods used there, or, for example, man-in-the-middle attacks, or, testing the security of the wireless interface, which is mainly used for testing the protocol. And then we have application layer that, for example, for testing web applications, or doing input validation, which is something very important, and also some other testing. And then there's a cross layer. So we not only, try to do the testing and different layers, we also need to do cross layer testing here as well. And so just as a case study, I'm going to introduce actually the security issues I personally actually identified in 2018 in a PLC Next device. The story is that this company, we had a booth in 2018 in one of the security events next to Phoenix Contact. And at that time, they just released their PLC, the next generation PLC device. And they really bragged about the security of their devices. And they told me, hey, I mean, we really worked on the security of this device, and yeah, if you could find vulnerabilities, please report us, and that would be great. And to be honest, I use them as an example here, and I picked them because they actually care about security, not because they are, I don't know, a company which manufactures devices in the middle of nowhere and poses several security vulnerabilities. They are actually a German company. They care a lot about security, and also this device is a device which has been used in several critical infrastructure. And all of these vulnerabilities, by the way, have been reported to them as a responsible disclosure process. So everything is public, nothing is private here. So the first vulnerability is regarding the design. If you see, there is an SD card on this device, and when I saw that, and I personally looked into it and asked myself, why there is an SD card in a PLC? And then when I looked into the content of the SDK, I saw several different things. What I saw, for example, keys, and even, for example, a /etc/shadow file, which stores the passwords of a Linux systems usually, and also several other things as well. And even I thought maybe it's just something as a backup. But when I, for example, changed the password there, I saw the default password of the PLC was overridden. So basically, if an attacker goes into your organization and get this SDK and just write its own configuration, including passwords, keys, and everything, and changes it with the default SD card, then they can do everything. They have full access to this device. And when I contacted them and I asked, okay, what's wrong with it? Why did you do that? And they said their answer was that, first of all, this was due to the reason because this device is, of course, used in high availability environment, and yeah, this is the main requirement of the OT infrastructure. And then they told me because the manufacturer wanted to actually be able to, use this SDK to, change the configuration as soon as possible if something bad happened. And then they said, yeah, it has to be also used in a physically secured environment. And then first of all, we mentioned that you shouldn't really have this assumption about the environment of your customer because this is wrong. I mean, lots of things we have seen happen there. And the second thing is that there has to be some form of, some level of actually accepted level between the security and also usability here. You really focus here on usability, but you completely forgot about security. Anyways, we reported this to CISO, and also CISO also published that and made them kind of to fix this. So this was the main design vulnerability. And the second thing was regarding protocol fuzzing, actually. I mean, I found this one by chance, to be honest. And I was trying to actually do the test mainly the encryption between the device. So, for example, changing the SSL certificates and see if it's vulnerable to man-in-the-middle attack. And then as a result, I saw the main PLC service was completely stopped, and it didn't work until you restart the device. So mainly, I mean, it was a problem between the PCWorks, which is an application to program this PLC device, and also the PLC itself. Okay, and then it means it was actually a protocol fuzzing issue that resulted in stopping the main PLC service on this PLC device. And then, which means that an attacker, just with the network access, without having any privileged access to the device, could actually stop this PLC device over the network, and it couldn't be fixed unless otherwise they go and restart this PLC. So, which means, I mean, this was an issue over the network, which could have been found with protocol fuzzing. And then, in addition to that, we analyzed firmware automatically using our automated firmware analysis solution and found several third-party components with known vulnerabilities and reported this to them. And they say, yeah, we don't really monitor our third-party components. But this is actually a very new, important, and new requirements here. So, and now, I mean, everybody here is talking about the Cyber Resilience Act. So, one of the main requirements of the Cyber Resilience Act is the mandates of SBOM. So, every device manufacturer should share software bill of materials with their customers. And they also are responsible to monitor their vulnerabilities, and also their customer can also monitor that as well. So, the point is that, yeah, you have several, third-party components. You need to be able to constantly monitor them, to be able to identify if any new issue is, identified in each of them. And the interesting point is that I don't know how many of you have heard about regression vulnerability, which was identified in July in OpenSSH. But we also, recently analyzed, after this vulnerability was identified, analyzed the firmware of this PLC and identified the regression vulnerability, that it was affected by regression. And it took them, as a company who monitors their SBOM and who cares about the security, it took them 23 days. This is the fastest one, by the way, to really fix this and share it with the customers. And I was just thinking, on 1st of July, this vulnerability was identified. And on 23rd of July, actually, the new firmware was shared. Imagine that the customer just, updated the firmware the same day that it was published. What about that 23 days that this vulnerability was public and could be, affected by hackers? So in my opinion, and of course in several people's opinion, every corporate user should also have their own SBOM management to be able to detect whenever a new vulnerability is available, to be able to at least, provide some virtual patching until the new, firmware version or patch is available by the manufacturer. And last but not least, this is about, D-Link device that we identify as zero-day vulnerability. There are several of these devices that are developed based upon the old code bases, and are vulnerable to command injection, stack buffer overflow, and format string, and these kinds of things. And recently also CISA and FBI published a guidance that, there has been several command injection vulnerabilities identified, and advise vendor to, work and secure by design to be able to prevent this vulnerability. But what we're saying is that how about the legacy devices? How about the, old code bases which is out there? Which means that, the firmware and also the third party and the first party component of every firmware should be tested in order to be able to identify these, potential zero-day vulnerabilities. So, there have been a lot of lessons that could be learned from this, but for me, the first thing that manufacturers should pay attention to is to, first of all, incorporate security by design at design stage, because if there is a design issue is identified at a later stage, it takes them a long time to fix this. And second of all, continuously monitor and continuously test at several layers of these devices, and also monitor, for example, SBOM and those kinds of the third-party components. And also for enterprise users, you shouldn't really place blind trust on manufacturers, okay? So if they share a SBOM with you, you have to verify it, because I can tell you here, a lot of them don't provide you with accurate SBOM or software bill of materials. They can share something with you which might not be accurate, okay, for several reasons which we can discuss after this session. So you can trust, but don't place blind trust, and always verify. So always verify whatever manufacturer provides for you. And by the way, for your information, there has been a new guidance about security by demand recently published by CISA, and about the several requirements that enterprise user can ask about the software, mainly software providers, including device manufacturers as well.
Right, thank you, Zahra.